Welcome to primetime, bitch! Hey everyone, it's Movie Lover 120 here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review, and this movie review is going to be for none other than the third installment in the horror franchise I am currently reviewing and finishing up on. And that franchise is, of course, obviously the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And this time, now that I've finished the first two installments, I will be reviewing the third installment in the series, and that's, of course, none other than 1987's fan favorite, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, aka the third installment in the series, and what is many consider to be the best sequel in the series. Yeah, which was released in 1987. So what's the plot of this one? Well, picking up where the original Nightmare left off, Nancy has grown up and become a psychiatrist or specializing in dream therapy. She meets a group of children at a local hospital facing Freddy Krueger, the same demon she once encountered in her sleep. One of them is Kristen, who has the power to draw other people into her dreams. Working with a male doctor assigned to the case, Nancy helps the kids realize their special abilities within the nightmare world. When Freddy captures one of her charges, she leads a rescue attempt into Krueger's domain, in hopes of putting his spirit to rest once and for all. Yeah. So, how was the movie made? Well, following the critical failure of Freddy's Revenge, New Line Cinema was unsure if they would continue with the franchise. Wes Craven, who wrote and directed the first film, did not participate in the first sequel. He did not want the original to evolve into a franchise like Friday the 13th, but co-wrote the screenplay for the third installment with the intention it would end the series. But however, since The Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors proved to be such a box office success and was successful with fans, New Line Cinema decided to continue the series with or without Craven's involvement. Craven's very first concept in the film was to have Freddy Krueger invade the real world. Krueger would haunt the actors filming a new Nightmare on Elm Street sequel. New Line Cinema rejected the meta-cinematic idea, but years later, Craven's concept was brought to the screen in Wes Craven's New Nightmare around 7 years after this movie. Craven himself would be unavailable for directing, as he was tied with filming Deadly Friend on the same time. And before it was decided what script would be used for the film's story, both John Saxon and Robert Englund wrote their own scripts for a third Nightmare film. In Saxon's script called How the Nightmare on Elm Street All Began, which would have been a prequel story. Freddy would ultimately turn out to have been an innocent, or at least set up for the murders by Charles Manson, who along with his followers would have been the main culprit of the murders. Freddy would be forced by the angry mob of parents to make a confession of the crimes, which would enrage them further. After they'd lynched Freddy, he'd come back to avenge his wrongful death by targeting the parents as children. Which thankfully did not happen, because that would have been bullshit. In Englund's treatment, called Freddy's Funhouse, the protagonist would have been Tina Gray's older sister, who would have been in college by the time Tina was murdered, and ends up coming back to Springwood to investigate how she died. In his script, Freddy had claimed the 142A Elm Street house for his own in the dream world, setting up booby traps like Nancy did against him. And according to Englund, part of it later ended up being used in the pilot episode of Freddy's Nightmares, aka that show, after the script had been lying around unused for a few years. Okay, that's still better than the Charles Manson script, I'll say that. Thank God they did not go with the Charles Manson storyline, because the movie would have sucked. So, Dream Warriors would eventually release into theaters around the beginning of 1987 on February 27th, and it grossed $44.8 million domestically at the box office on a budget of over $4 million, something that's kind of unusual for a horror movie or a horror sequel. So that's kind of a bit of a surprise for a horror movie around that time, because horror movies around that time weren't really known for being very profitable, or were just minorly profitable at best. It received mostly positive reviews from critics and is considered by many to be one of the best films in the Elm Street series, among many fans. As for my reaction, this is my favorite Elm Street sequel, as many fans would say. Some consider New Nightmare their favorite of the sequels, but me and many others, such as Hellhound and Cody Leach, Dream Warriors is the better one of the two. The film would also be known for bringing the comedic Freddy that would become prominent for the rest of the series from this point on, up until New Nightmare. Part of that is Freddy isn't as scary in the first two, but this one is like the balancing of. But this one, they balance the horror version of him and the comedy version of him. He really becomes the icon that we all know today thanks to this film. The setting also helps to build that fear. They're stuck together in a bunch of people are stuck together in a mental hospital where they can't get out, and Dr. Sims makes it worse by not only locking their doors but sedating them, making them helpless against Freddy by not being able to wake up or stay awake. They're like a group of diverse characters, which I also did like. This movie even states that they are the last of the Elm Street kids, which I can take or leave there, regardless of a fan's opinion. This really only comes up when they are referring to Nancy's father, Lieutenant Thompson, who's played by John Saxon again, when Nancy's telling the kids in a group. This actually kind of makes sense with later mythology, though, that Freddy can only spread through fear. The gripe that people have with a lot of horror films is that when the killer is toying with them, being kept alive by fear, Freddy would have to do this. Now, all of these teens were seeing him before coming in, but if they live in the same area would fit. It is curious they don't know each other, though. Nightmare 3 is easily what you can call the most imaginative and creative of all the Freddy sequels. The dreams the kids have are very well done, and the kid in the wheelchair who likes magic and wizards is able to walk in his dreams. Kincaid has superhuman strength, so on and so forth. I love the fact that all the teens have a very special power in their dreams, which they can use against Freddy Krueger. Some of the deaths are very well done too, as well with regards to special effects. One of my favorite kills of the franchise is when Freddy shoves a young girl's head into the television set with shouting, "Welcome to Pride Time, bitch," which I recorded in the intro to this video. Yeah, and I also really love Nancy in this one. Remember that teen girl Nancy was in the first one? Well, she's all grown up now, and she's back in this sequel. And it's good to see her again. I mean, granted, I didn't really like they killed her off in the end, but unlike with how they usually follow this trope, with certain horror sequels where the protagonist dies to the killer's hands, or the antagonist's hands, how they do it, I like how they don't just start off with their death like a load of horror sequels do, like Friday the 13th Part 2, although I didn't really mind how they did it in Friday the 13th Part 2. I mean, at least it kind of had a reason to be in Friday the 13th Part 2, but certain other bad horror sequels would do it without any build up or so. Alien 3 would do this bullshit, except Nancy actually had a good send off on Ripley or Newt or Hicks. Then what else can I think of? Halloween Resurrection did this bullshit with Laurie Strode. I mean, how Resurrection did it was probably still the stupidest way ever. While it does show Michael was a psychopath, I didn't like how they just suddenly have Laurie Strode dying of failure in a mental asylum, which was probably pointless. And then you have Hostel Part 2, where Paxton was found by the Eli Hunting Club and just randomly beheaded after having a dream of him dying in the hospital. And personally, between those two and Hostel 2, I would have preferred the hospital better. The hospital was a way better death for him. Not randomly just getting cut off and then a cat licking his wound, which basically was just a Friday the 13th 2 knockoff scene. Tribute or not, they still kind of ripped off the beginning of Friday the 13th 2 with that move. But I get why they did it. But anyway, back onto this review. Back onto Nancy. Nancy, on the other hand, actually dies at the very end of Elm Street 3, and she actually dies fighting Freddy and defeating him. Now that is how you send off a character to horror. I wish more horror sequels would try to do it this way. But no, it's always got to be the cheap way of things. Here, it actually gives a good send-off to her story. For once, I actually like this movie, actually did it right. My other bad qualities I have in this movie is that Dr. Elizabeth Sims was so fucking annoying. Like, ugh, ugh. She always thinks putting her patients in this room called the Quiet Room is going to cure them and stop their hallucinations. Nope. Instead, it basically, the only thing it does is it lets Freddy kill them. She's basically, so yeah, she's basically helping Freddy murder them, straight up. And basically, yeah, by doing that, she's literally assisting Freddy Krueger into completing his plans. Because it just gives Freddy Krueger fresh victims and makes their powers against him useless. And what's worse, she doesn't even die in this movie. I mean, in the novelization, it kind of reveals it, but she should have died in this movie for being such a dumbass. Like, I really wanted Freddy to slit her damn throat, but no. She pretty much gets off scot-free for her crimes. Like, scot-free kind of just continues running the place in the end. It doesn't really seem to get any comeuppance. So that kind of pisses me off. Because she deserved to die so much for screwing everything up. Like, it's like she's kind of the reason Nancy died in the first place. Another bad quality is that this movie unfortunately would introduce us to the comedic Freddy we would get in the sequels after this, but the difference here with comedic Freddy in this movie and comedic Freddy in the other movies is that his comedic one-liners are not just thrown in there for him to try to be funny. His comedic one-liners in this are actually sadistic threats against his victims, or even taunts, so I like how they did it here. He was perfect that way. Like, there's a difference. Like, Freddy was still evil, he still had some horror to him in this, unlike in all the other sequels, he was still a threat. Despite his comedic one-liners, he's still kind of scary, at least when he needs to be. So they kind of perfectly balanced him here. But anyway, that's it for my review of Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. So overall, if you loved the first Elm Street movie, and you want to see Nancy come back and see the true story of the first one finally come back, then easily give this movie a watch because it is an example of a phenomenal horror sequel that works very well, and a rare example of a third installment that does not suck, or is not the worst. And it's honestly, it's easily the best Elm Street sequel yet, and some days I even consider this the best Elm Street movie yet. So yeah, this is definitely a worth buying for sure. Anyway, that's it for my review of Elm Street 3, and here's how I'm going to rank Elm Street 3. I'm going to give Nightmare on Elm Street 3 a 9 out of 10. There we go. That's it for my review of Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And yes, guys, I got this Freddy Krueger at Fan Expo this weekend. And the reason I didn't wear the mask is because the mask was it's kind of hard to wear that for like 10 minutes, so I just decided to do the rest of the series without the mask, really. I mean, sure, I kind of wish I wore my fedora and glove, but it's kind of too late to do that now. I already kind of did this video, but yeah, but I'm probably just going to go, you already see my fedora and glove at this rate, so, but they're the thumbnails, so. Anyway, that will be it for this review. My next one is going to be for Nightmare on Elm Street 4, which to me is probably the last decent Elm Street movie we got before New Nightmare. But until then, that'll be it for this video. Thank y'all for watching, and if you like this and want to see more, then don't forget to like, subscribe to Movie Lover 120.